The transmission arrived on a crisp morning in Geneva, beamed directly into the unified Earth diplomatic corps. A sleek obsidian cube, about the size of a fist, hovered above the reception desk, glowing with a strange inner pulse. It said only 5 words: Humanity invited. Deathworld Summit. The ambassadorial staff stared at it in silence. A week later, after frantic analysis, interpretation, and 3 emergency sessions of the United Nations Space Council, Earth had cobbled together a delegation. No one knew exactly what to expect, but everyone understood this was either a profound honor or a carefully disguised execution. Vorix 4, Entry Point. The human shuttle descended through the churning gray clouds of Vorix 4, a planet classified as a Class 9 Deathworld. Hurricane force winds battered the hull. Lightning arced like celestial whips across the sky. The planet's surface, a mosaic of acidic rivers, carnivorous flora, and seismic instability, looked like a nature documentary shot in hell. Inside the shuttle, Captain Miriam Voss stood at the viewport, arms crossed, expression unreadable. "Cheer up, Captain," said Dr. Raj Patel, adjusting his oxygen filtration collar. "Nothing says warm welcome like being invited to a survival conference held on a planet that eats dropships for breakfast." Miriam didn't look away from the storm. "Keep your sense of humor, document. We might need to eat it later." Behind them, Sergeant Kell Bear Anders snorted, tightening the straps on his armor. "Eat humor? Better than the rats in Caracas back in '52. Raj raised a brow. "You ate rats." "Only the juicy ones." The shuttle shuddered violently as it broke through the final layer of atmosphere and angled toward the Concorde landing zone. First contact at the summit. Dozens of alien species gathered at the summit complex, a massive spire of black metal and living stone rising from the crust like a thorn. The Galactic Concorde had chosen this location, not for hospitality, but to test. To weed out the weak. Every species present had evolved, or adapted, to Deathworld conditions. All had passed the rite. Humanity, newcomers to the interstellar stage, had not. As the human delegation disembarked, silence spread across the plaza. Hundreds of eyes, compound, luminous, multifaceted, watched. Miriam's boots hit the ground with a satisfying crunch. She stood tall, despite the thin atmosphere and the subtle gravitational fluctuations that made her muscles ache. Her uniform was Earth standard, black, blue piping minimalist. No armor, no weapons, just presence. A massive quadruped approached. Its skin glistened like obsidian glass, and its voice echoed without a mouth. "Humans," it said, "we welcome you to the Deathworld Summit. We are Zatel of the Varnak Collective. Your kind has not yet been assessed." Miriam inclined her head. "We appreciate the invitation." It was not an invitation. It was a summons. Bear muttered under his breath. "Well, that's ominous." Raj leaned toward Miriam. "Notice how no one else brought unarmed diplomats." She nodded. "Let's make them regret underestimating us." The first test. The orientation turned out to be a survival scenario. All delegations were sent into separate biomes, each carefully curated to challenge species-specific weaknesses. Humanity was dropped into Zone 8, an unstable geothermal basin prone to sudden eruptions, filled with razor-limbed predators and breathable, but barely, atmosphere. Within the first 6 hours, 3 members of another species team were presumed dead. The humans, meanwhile, had set up camp, identified local edible fungi, constructed heat shelters, and even crafted basic defense perimeter alarms from melted shuttle wiring. It was Bear who killed the first predator. The creature, a 6-legged reptile with chitinous armor and a sonic shriek, came barreling through the trees at dusk. Miriam was already reaching for the emergency beacon when Bear charged it with a sharpened pole, screaming like a Viking berserker. When it fell, thrashing and bleeding, Bear stood atop it, panting, grinning like a madman. "Dinner." Raj stared at him. "You're insane. You're welcome." Later that night, Raj quietly tagged the creature's liver as potentially consumable. An accident. On the second night, their camp was sabotaged. A directed plasma charge exploded near their habitat dome. No casualties, thanks to Bear's paranoia and repositioning of sleeping mats, but the message was clear. This wasn't just a test. It was a rigged game. Raj examined the device's remnants. Drakari tech. Military grade. Someone wants us gone. More than one someone, said Miriam, standing guard by the fire. They don't just want us to fail. They want us erased. Bear was sharpening a bone blade. Let him try again. Reputation begins. By day 3, the other species had taken notice. Not only were the humans still alive, they were adapting. When toxic pollen flooded a valley, they crafted makeshift gas masks using scavenged filters and plant resin. When their water supply was compromised, Raj devised a distillation system using volcanic steam. The Athari, a photosynthetic species with diplomatic sway, sent an observer to watch the humans work. You do not fear the world, Clara, the Athari liaison, said to Raj. He smiled, eyes bloodshot but determined. Fear's not the problem. Dying stupid is. By the end of the day, the Athari requested to share perimeter security protocols with the humans. That was unheard of. Miriam noticed the glances they received now from other teams, curious, wary, calculating. We're being upgraded, she said. From prey to anomaly. End of chapter beat. That evening, the humans sat around a flickering campfire, surrounded by one of the most dangerous environments in the galaxy. Lightning cracked across the horizon. Tomorrow, Miriam said, they'll throw something bigger. Bear nodded. Let him. I'm just getting warmed up. Raj looked up at the alien sky and sighed. Isn't it beautiful, though? This whole thing, what a way to meet the galaxy. Miriam stared into the flames. They wanted to see if we'd die. Let's show them how we live. Key chapter themes and elements. Human ingenuity, improvised tech, survival strategies and resourcefulness. Resilience and adaptability, refusal to quit, even when clearly outmatched. Cultural/philosophical clashes. The Concord sees survival as controlled and structured. Humans bring chaos and unpredictability. HFY tone. Mix of tension, awe, humor, and defiance. Foreshadowing. The sabotage and summons reveal the summit is more dangerous than diplomatic. The Concord called it a unity trial. The humans called it a cosmic hazing ritual wrapped in bureaucracy. Either way, the challenge was clear. Survival, cooperation, and strategy, with no technology beyond what the environment allowed. No weapons. No translators. No synthetics. Just raw terrain, biological instincts, and luck. The test was supposed to promote interspecies collaboration. In practice, it was a crucible to expose weakness. And Earth's delegation had just been paired with the Drakari, a species that wanted them dead. The trial begins. Zone 12 was selected for the humans and their assigned allies, a steaming, unstable jungle full of venomous creatures, acid-spitting fungi, and time-dilated weather systems that scrambled perception. Heat shimmered off the ground in thick waves. The trees swayed like they were alive. And some were. Captain Miriam Voss surveyed the terrain, eyes narrowed. Well, she said, at least we won't freeze to death. Sergeant Bear Anders had already stripped to his undershirt. Feels like Panama. Or a malfunctioning sauna. I like it. Dr. Raj Patel was less enthused. I've cataloged 36 airborne pathogens since we landed. I think one of them just winked at me. Their Drakari partners landed shortly after, tall, reptilian bipeds with skin like volcanic glass and eyes that glowed with malice. Their leader, Commander KVK, barely hid his contempt. You will stay out of our way, humans, he growled. We will handle this trial alone. Miriam just smiled. Sure. Just yell if you need saving. They didn't. And wouldn't. But they would end up needing it. Nature tests them all. By nightfall, the Drakari had already lost one of their number, ambushed by a flying parasite that injected neuroacid. The humans, meanwhile, had erected a makeshift shelter, complete with spike traps, filtered water, and a perimeter alert system made from local insect pheromones and sonic clay. Raj even managed to domesticate a glowing beetle that now perched happily on his shoulder. He named it Greg. "Say hi, Greg." Greg blinked twice. Bear grunted. "If that thing lays eggs in your brain, I'm not pulling them out." Tensions with the Drakari escalated when Miriam and Bear returned from a scouting run with a small cache of edible protein sacs, fungus-like growths that burst like meat balloons. The Drakari accused them of stealing from their quadrant. KVK drew a ceremonial blade. "Thieves." Miriam didn't flinch. "You want to fight? Let's fight." The Concord observers, who monitored from cloaked platforms above, authorized a controlled duel. Drakari tradition. No weapons, but what the jungle provided.
Bear volunteered.
"Time to play jungle rules," he muttered, cracking his neck.
The duel.
The duel took place in a clearing surrounded by thick, steaming vines and glowing moss. The alien flora pulsed like a heartbeat. KVK chose a serrated fong ripped from a local predator. Bear walked in with a sharpened stick, a strip of bark wrapped around one arm, and a smile. The fight began brutally. KVK struck fast and hard, using brute force. Bear ducked, slipped in the mud, rolled under, then jabbed KVK in the side with the stick, and retreated. He kept moving, dodging behind trees, using the terrain to stay mobile. To the aliens watching, it was cowardice. To Bear, it was strategy. KVK roared and charged, stepping on a patch of soft moss. Bear had watched a jungle hare do the same thing earlier. The moss exploded into a cloud of hallucinogenic spores. KVK staggered. Bear tackled him into a shallow pit he'd dug earlier and filled with ant-like insects. The Drakari screamed as the insects swarmed his limbs. Bear yanked him out a moment later. Alive, humiliated, and hallucinating something about human sorcery. He turned to the audience, grinning. "No magic," he said. "Just a little jungle jujitsu." The Concord didn't laugh, but some aliens did. Alliances shift. After the duel, the tone of the summit shifted. The Thari sent supplies. A species known as the Velex, previously silent, asked Miriam for tactical advice. The humans weren't just surviving now, they were commanding attention. Later that day, a roaming jungle storm blew through the valley. Trees cracked in half. Winds howled like banshees. The humans had prepped. The Drakari had not. Bear and Miriam led a joint effort to stabilize their shelters using braided vines and sap-reinforced supports. When Raj wrapped a leaking biotentacle around a thermal stone to create a space heater, the Athari began recording his techniques. KVK, still reeling from the duel, muttered, "Perhaps you are not prey after all." Raj raised a brow. "A compliment. Mark the date." The Fire Bloom ambush. Just when things began to stabilize, the jungle turned against them again. A fire bloom, a rare, explosive plant, detonated near the food stores at dawn. Raj barely escaped the blast radius. It was sabotage. Again. Miriam examined the remains. The ignition mechanism had been tampered with. This time, it wasn't the Drakari. "They're testing how we respond," she said quietly. "Someone in the Concord wants to provoke a diplomatic incident. If we retaliate, we're the barbarians." Bear grunted. "Then we don't retaliate. We outshine." Raj looked at the growing list of allies. "And we keep winning hearts." A growing reputation. By the end of the Unity trial, humanity had devised 5 new field survival techniques now logged in the Concord database, established an informal cross-species defense network, earned favor from 3 previously aloof species, embarrassed the Drakari on their own terms, resisted provocation with unexpected restraint. As the teams were airlifted out, Miriam caught sight of Concord officials whispering among themselves, their expressions unreadable. Clara of the Athari approached. "You are not what we expected," she said. Miriam smiled.
"Good."
End of chapter beat. That night, back in the Summit Hub, the human team cleaned up in their small debrief chamber. Bear nursed a bruised rib. Raj catalogued Beetle Greg's digestive byproducts. Miriam stood by the observation window, watching the jungle below still churn and pulse in the moonlight. "They didn't invite us to join," she said softly. "They invited us to watch us break." Raj nodded. And instead, we've made friends. Maybe more than that. Bear looked up. And pissed off all the right people. Miriam smiled. Then we're doing it right. The Deathworld Summit wasn't just about surviving the wild. It was about proving one's species deserved a seat at the galactic table. And humanity, much to the surprise and frustration of many, wasn't just surviving anymore. They were influencing. That was unacceptable to some. The next stage of the summit wasn't physical. It was political. The doctrine exchange. Each species was required to present its apex doctrine, the philosophical or cultural foundation that enabled its survival and ascension from its death world. The Athari spoke of photosynthetic unity, the fusion of life into ecosystems so stable they bent predators into symbiosis. The Drakari glorified martial supremacy. Only the strongest bloodlines rose to rule. The Velex believed in biological optimization, engineering perfection through generations of pain. Then came the humans. Their presentation was unusual. It began with a campfire. Not a hologram. A real one, fueled by local wood, built right in the Concord Amphitheater with permits obtained through a dozen loopholes. Raj lit it with a spark from Greg's bioluminescent shell. Bear dropped into a seat and pulled out a tin of food rations. Miriam stood in front of the flames. No monuments. No manifestos, she said. Just this.
Fire. Company.
A place to talk.
She paused.
Our doctrine isn't about bloodlines or biohacking. It's not even about strength. It's about will. The human drive to stand up again and again and choose meaning over extinction. She looked around. We didn't inherit Earth. We survived it. By helping each other. By laughing when we should have screamed. By making stories out of trauma and singing in the dark. We're not the strongest. Not the fastest. But we never give up. And that's why we're still here. Silence. Then Bear pulled out a harmonica and started playing a slow, bluesy tune. It was raw, improvised, unscripted. The summit had never seen anything like it. Reactions and ripples. The reactions were mixed. Many aliens, particularly those from hyperstructured societies, were baffled. A few were offended, but some were moved. Clara of the Athari spoke later that night. There is a storm in your people, she said to Raj. A storm that does not destroy, but reshapes. Sometimes it does both, Raj admitted. Back in their quarters, Bear flopped onto his cot. You think they got it? Miriam looked out at the alien skyline. They felt it. That's what matters. Concord tensions. Behind the scenes, the human team's popularity had upset the Concord's balance. Traditionally dominant species, like the Drakari and the Velex, were whispering of preferential treatment, even manipulation. More sabotage incidents were reported, supplies missing, transport delays, falsified bioscans. Concord oversight chalked it up to environmental anomalies. Miriam wasn't buying it. Somebody's testing how far we can be pushed, she said. Let's not give them a reason to find out. The Concord Tribunal. 3 days after the Apex Doctrine event, humanity was summoned to a tribunal. The charge? Cultural destabilization. It was absurd but dangerous. The tribunal had the authority to remove any species from the summit for conduct deemed disruptive to Concord unity. Miriam, Raj, and Bear entered the towering chamber to a wall of scrutinizing eyes. KVK of the Drakari stood at the center of the prosecutorial dais. The humans have not proven themselves worthy, he growled. They flout tradition. They corrupt weaker species with emotional manipulation. They make jokes during death trials. Bear raised his hand. Objection. Our jokes are excellent. The chamber buzzed. Miriam stepped forward. With respect, she said, our survival, our alliances, and our conduct are all within the parameters of the summit. If emotion is destabilizing, perhaps it's your system that's brittle, not our presence. A murmur spread. One of the Concord elders, a six-eyed being called Torvash of the Nullcream, tilted his head. Explain this emotional resilience further. Raj stepped up. It's simple, he said. You've all trained your minds to suppress instinct. To survive, through control. We survive by letting ourselves feel and still act. Fear doesn't paralyze us. Grief doesn't break us. We carry it like armor. He gestured to Miriam and Bear. That's why you can't predict us. We're chaos wrapped in hope. The chamber fell silent. Then Torvash uttered 3 words no one expected. We will deliberate. Interim, broken bonds, and new ones. After the tribunal, the team returned to their quarters to find the locks overridden and their data wiped. Raj stared at the empty terminal. That's not deliberation. That's a warning. Bear paced like a caged wolf. They want us to snap. Miriam remained calm. Then we don't. She pulled out a paper journal, one of the few analog items they brought, and started rewriting their findings by hand. Raj joined her. Bear stood watch. Later that night, the Velex envoy arrived, without Concord escort. We do not like you, she said bluntly. But we respect you. Our elders request a demonstration of your neurological resilience training. Raj blinked. You want therapy?
No.
We want your battle meditation protocol. Bear burst out laughing. Lady, we call that deep breathing and thinking about dogs. They agreed to share what they could. And just like that, another crack appeared in the Concord's hierarchy. The false rescue. 2 nights later, a Concord ship landed near their compound, lights blazing. Immediate extraction authorized. You are to return to Earth pending tribunal review. But something was wrong. The ship was too small. The crew didn't identify themselves. Their uniforms were subtly wrong. Off-color, symbols reversed. Miriam held up a hand. Hold. The lead officer frowned. Delay is a violation of Concord Compliance Order 47A. Raj casually scanned their energy signatures behind his back. No Concord frequency. He paled. It's a hit squad. Bear didn't wait. He was already moving. The ambush exploded into motion. The humans ducked behind a pile of fusion crates as plasma fire lit up the night. Raj triggered a pulse beacon to alert nearby allies. Miriam and Bear flanked left and right, using the terrain and debris like second nature. 1 attacker dropped. Then 2. Clara and a Velex warrior arrived seconds later, weapons drawn. The would-be assassins scattered and vanished into the jungle. Miriam stood slowly, her uniform singed. Well, she said. Now we're definitely destabilizing. End of chapter beat. Back at the emergency council chamber, Miriam faced the Concord once more. No more games, she said. Someone inside your system just tried to kill us. We've followed every rule, played every test, and you still treat us like a threat. Torvash of the Null Cream leaned forward. Because you are. The lights dimmed. And that may be exactly what we need. The attempt on the human team's life had done more than fail. It had sparked an awakening. Whispers spread through the summit. If someone had tried to assassinate the humans, who would be next? If humans, uninvited and underestimated, could survive sabotage, thrive in the wild, and shift alliances just by being themselves, what else might they do? Suddenly, the Concord wasn't the center of order anymore. It was the eye of a coming storm. And the humans? They were the thunder on the horizon. The proposal. Concord officials attempted damage control after the failed extraction. Torvash of the Null Cream summoned the humans in private. There was no theater this time, no grand chambers. Just a conversation. You were never meant to be contenders, he admitted, his 6 eyes unreadable. You were invited to prove a point. That even your kind would fail. Miriam folded her arms. We didn't. No, Torvash agreed. And now we have a choice. Integrate you, or destroy the game. Raj leaned forward. Why not just change the game? That stopped the elder cold. Miriam seized the opening. The Concord structure is built on stagnation. Trial by tradition. Politics hardened into ritual. But survival isn't about comfort. It's about adaptation. She let the silence stretch. Let us build something new. A coalition of outliers. Species who've been watching the same cycle repeat and want more. You propose a splinter faction?
No, she said.
We propose an evolution. The Deathworld Accord. The humans dubbed it the Deathworld Accord, a pact between species not united by biology or ideology, but by experience. Each of them came from hostile, unpredictable worlds. They understood struggle. They understood chaos. They knew how to make meaning from pain. At first, only a few came. The Velex, curious and calculating. The Ithari, driven by curiosity. A scattered few others on the fringes of Concord politics. But then the unheard began to step forward. Minor species, often ignored. Refugees from dying biomes. Biomex, once considered obsolete. Each had a story. Each found resonance in humanity's doctrine. We endure, not by perfection, but by will. They formed a council, a small one. No ranks, no dominance. A network instead of a pyramid. And in the center, Earth's delegation. Not rulers, but catalysts. Last trial, the labyrinth of echoes. The Concord, uneasy but unwilling to start an open conflict, proposed a final test, the labyrinth of echoes. It was ancient, older than the Concord. Older, some said, than galactic memory itself. A living megastructure, shifting halls of biometal, reactive to emotion, thought, and memory. It was said to reveal the truth of those who walked it. Most who entered never returned. Let me guess, Bear muttered. No maps. Just trauma, Raj said. It's like therapy, but with more screaming. Miriam looked at the entry seal. They think it'll break us. Raj smiled grimly. Let's disappoint them. Inside the maze. The door sealed behind them with a whisper. Immediately, the labyrinth pressed in, not physically, but mentally. The walls pulsed with old pain, drawing up memories like splinters. It fed on unresolved emotion. Bear saw his old squad, dead during a covert evac in Antarctica, their faces accusing. Raj relived the lab collapse on Mars Colony Beta, the fire, the screaming, his failure to save his sister. Miriam saw the look on her father's face when she enlisted and the empty chair at his funeral 2 years later. They pressed forward anyway. Each chamber threw something different at them, hallucinatory guilt, temporal loops, shape-shifted versions of themselves urging surrender. But they talked. They shared. They carried each other. At one point, Bear simply sat with Raj in the darkness, arm around his shoulder, saying nothing. At another, Miriam sang, badly, off-key, just to drown out the whispering walls. Where others had walked alone, they walked as a unit. That was the difference. The turning point. At the center of the labyrinth stood a final trial, a mirror chamber. Not literal mirrors, reflections of identity, warped and twisted. For many species, this was where the psyche broke. Confronting the worst possible version of yourself. The humans stepped forward one by one. Raj saw himself choosing safety over risk, never venturing to help anyone again. He rejected it. Bear saw himself drowning in rage, using violence not as protection, but vengeance. He punched the vision in the face. Miriam's reflection simply asked, "What if you're not enough?" She looked it dead in the eye. "I'm not. That's why I bring others." The mirror cracked. The labyrinth shuddered. And then it opened. The humans emerged, the first team in recorded history to survive as a unit without loss. Outside, the Concord was waiting. The vote. The summit's final act was symbolic, a vote to decide whether humanity, and now the Deathworld Accord, would be granted provisional Concord status. KVK of the Drakari tried one last time to discredit them. They are emotion-driven, disruptive, dangerous. Miriam stepped up beside him. "You're not wrong," she said. "But so is every origin species represented here. You all were dangerous once. You had to be. That's why you survived your own death worlds. We haven't forgotten what that means." She looked out at the crowd. "Maybe you need us to remind you." Torvash stood. "We do." The vote passed. Not unanimously, but decisively. Humanity was in. So was the Accord. The aftermath. Within weeks, Concord Protocol began to shift. The Deathworld Accord gained formal recognition as an advisory network, independent, but connected. Humanity was assigned a permanent delegation. Raj was invited to co-author Concord's psychological protocols. Bear was approached to teach adaptive combat training. Miriam declined all offers for personal power. Instead, she helped draft a universal ethics framework, one that emphasized emotional sovereignty, cross-species mutual aid, and nonlinear resilience. What does that even mean? Bear asked. She smiled. It means sometimes survival looks like crying together in a mud pit. He grinned. I like our kind of diplomacy. Final scene. The campfire returns. Weeks later, the humans hosted a gathering under the stars on an artificial cliffside overlooking the summit grounds. No podiums. Just a fire. Clara arrived first. Then a Velex representative. Even a few young Drakari, curious and skeptical, lingered at the edge. Miriam nodded to them all. Next time, she said, maybe we invite you to Earth. One of the Velex blinked. Is it true you once domesticated a death lizard using peanut butter and a lullaby? Bear raised his harmonica. Only on Thursdays. Laughter rippled through the camp. And above them, the stars kept watching.